G'day guys, Josh here. Hope you guys are having a great day so far. So looking at the new Wolfnado build, and we're going to look at our tenants as well while reviewing this Wolfnado build, whether it does enough damage, it clears a dungeon in a quick manner as well, how fast does it clear a dungeon, and lastly as well, how does it have high enough defense to take some hits if it needs to, and also does the build synergize well with the various aspects, and does it work like a well-oiled machine? Am I waiting for cooldowns before I can do anything? This is the main thing we're going to check out with this build quite shortly, but first of all, we're going to go through the actual build itself. Now, first off, with the build, we're going to go through the skill tree, okay? Skill tree is always the first thing you're going to go through with the build, so let's just get that done and dusted fairly quickly. So we're going to basically scroll to the top, and first things first, you're going to get Storm Strike, and you're going to go into Enhanced, into Fierce. The main thing why you want to go into this area is mainly because of the Immobilize, and also at the same time, the main one is the Vulnerability. The Vulnerability allows you to do more damage overall, and it's going to be mostly a key source of damage is going to be the Vulnerability debuff. Next up, we're going to go down to the core skills tree. We're going to max out Tornado, and we're going to go into Enhanced Tornado, and we're going to go into Raging Tornado. The main reason why we go into these areas is just to put the Vulnerable back up as quickly as we can. We are going to pick up 1 in Heart of Wild to increase the maximum spirit, but we're also going to go to Wild Impulses to go into get more core damage, and this is going to increase the damage of Tornado, which we'll fix in later. Next up, we're going to go to Predatory Instinct, which gives us more crit chance, and then we're going to go to Digigrade Great, which gives us more movement speed in wolf form to increase our speed clear. Next up, we're going to go to the next area. First off, we're going to get Ancestral Fortitude and Vigilance to make sure that when we use defensive skills such as Cyclone or even Bloodhowl as well, that we get a 50% damage reduction, which is very, very integral, given that you may take a lot of damage while using this build as well. We're also going to get a Cyclone Armor as well, where you get, a passive 10% damage reduction, and also at the same time, we can go to mitigate 30% damage reduction as well, if we use the active. Now, looking at it here, we've got Enhanced Cyclone Armor, which basically, enemies are knocked back are slowed by 70%, which is a good idea if you need to just get people to go away. And last but not least, that everyone gets vulnerability if they get hit by a Cyclone Armor, which makes your Tornadoes do more damage. Next up is Bloodhowl. You really only want to get 1 in Bloodhowl, and just basically keep spamming it relentlessly. So you also want to get Enhanced Bloodhowl, so basically it gets, every enemy you kill, puts 1 second of your cooldown, so you have it up at all times. And last but not least, you want Preserving Bloodhowl, where you get extra attack speed as well. Next up, you want to get Nothing in the Companions tree. Nothing in the Companions tree should interest you at all. Next up, you want to get into Elemental Exposure, so you have a chance of people becoming vulnerable. Everything else here is pretty much worthless for you, and you don't really need it. Now, also down here is where you want to get Neurotoxin, so enemies are slowed. This means that, if you got any CC bonus on your gear, that they do extra damage, and also being slow is great, or slowed is great. Also, you can see with Toxic Claws and Venom, basically poison enemies take 30% extra damage. You also want to get a neck that increases this as well. And also, last but not least, critical strikes with werewolf skills do 8% in poison damage. You only want to get 1 rank in this, because it just basically makes your Venom do more damage. Next up, you want to go to Grisly Rage, and then you want to get Unstoppable and also the Fortify. The main reason why you want to get this is you want to get a Direwolf form as well with the Grizzly Legendary, which we'll go through shortly. Then you want to get Defiance, Circle of Life, which gets you health back, and you want to get Resonance as well. Resonance, I gotta say right now, it won't matter too much for you, but you get the 6% extra damage regardless. But last but not least, you want to get the Defensive Posture, so you get more Fortify, and Nature's Resolve when to get more Fortify on you as well, which is very, very important in this build to be max fortified, as it gives 10% passive damage reduction. Last but not least, you want to get Perfect Storm, which basically your storm skills that you cast gain 1 spirit and deal 50% damage against vulnerable, slowed, or immobilized, which is pretty huge. Now, first of all, before we do anything more into this, now this build will not work unless you have Tempest Roar. Okay, if you have Tempest Roar or don't have it, don't bother with this build. Okay, it's not going to help you at all. Okay, now we're going to get to the gear. So the gear, what you want is Tempest Roar being your first one. You also want to try to get as high as you can to Lucky Hit. As you can see here, Storm skills have a chance to give you more spirit, which is quite high. You do more crit strike damage and damage while shapeshifted, and the poison resistance doesn't matter, to be honest. Next up, the main things you want to focus on in your chest and leg area is getting as much damage reduction as you can, and get some dodge chance if you can as well. The main damage reduction you want to get is from distant enemies, close enemies, and while fortified. And last but not least, you want to get it from poisoned enemies as well, because you're going to poison enemies, you're going to be fortified, and the damage reduction from close and distant enemies, you want to be pretty high as well. Because the passive damage reduction itself, flat damage reduction, is less if you target specific areas. If you get damage reduction while injured, it is pretty worthless for you, given the fact you want to remain at 100% health. So as you can see here, the armor pieces I got on my legs and my chest are alright, but not the greatest. Now also at the same time, you want basic skills granting 20% damage reduction for 6 seconds. So basically means every time you hit a storm strike, you get 6 seconds of 20% damage reduction, which is quite huge. And on the legs, you want to make sure you get disobedience, so your armor is increased by 50%. Next up for the gloves, you want to make sure you get the 4 ranked tornadoes, so your tornado does more damage. You want to get crit strike, attack speed, and lucky hit chance on this piece as well. Now with the boots, you want to get movement speed after killing an elite, dodge chance, and total armor and werewolf form. You also want to get the legendary aspect of when you become unstoppable for 4 seconds, you can walk through people. It means that if you get cucked by people that are blocking your way, you can just run through them instead. And also, not to mention as well, with the gloves as well, you want to get the tornado aspect. So you have, tornadoes will focus targets instead of just going wherever they want, which is very, very huge for your tornadoes to do a lot of damage. Next up with the weapon, you do want to get an axe, generally. You don't want to get a mace, you want to get an axe, which does extra damage to healthy enemies. And you want to focus on these 3 areas, which is going to be, basically, you want to focus on core skill damage, willpower, damage to close enemies, and vulnerable. So you can see I've got critical damage with werewolf skulls. That's not as bad, but it's still pretty decent. But you want to change that to enemies close to you. And you want to be an axe as well. Next up with the totem, you want a totem to have lucky hit chance, cooldown reduction, critical hit chance, and also damage reduction while fortified. So you can see here that I don't have it, but I have damage to kill instead. That's so, but you really want damage reduction on fortified because that's huge and you're reducing the damage done to you. Also, you want to have the imprint of duration of Grizzly Rage increased by 5 seconds, and critical strikes while Grizzly Rage is active increases your critical damage by 10%, which is absolutely huge. It rails if you damage during Grizzly Rage. Now on the mace as well, you want your core skills to deal up to 40% increased damage based on the amount of fortify. Given that you have 100% of fortify generally, this will be towards the 40% area. Next up on your rings, you always want the same things in your rings. You want your increased vulnerability damage, increased crit chance, increased lucky hit chance, and maximum life. You want all of this on your rings because it increases your ability to live. You also want skulls as well, and you also want critical structure. Your core abilities increase your attack speed because that increases your spirit generation. That increases you firing tornadoes out. Now in the other ring, you want Bloodhound, increase your crit strength chance by 9.5% to allow your tornadoes to crit more often, basically as well. And now, last but not least, on your neck, you do want damage reduction while fortified or poison mobs, plus 3 rate 3 to envenom to increase your poison critical struck damage, and then you want your spirit cost reduction and cooldown reduction. This makes your tornado cost a lot cheaper, and that's the last important bit of this build. Now we've gone through the abilities and we've gone through the gear. Now let's get into the Paragon tree as well. You can find the full Paragon tree in the link below, as I'm not level 100, so I don't have all the Paragon points yet. But we'll get into that very, very quickly as well. So with the Paragon points, first of all, the main ones you do want to level up is generally, I believe, the ones you want to level up the most is probably getting, depending on your form. If you're human, you want to get some other glyphs up. But if you're werewolf, which most of you guys will be with Tempest Roar, you want to get Undaunted to 15, then Exploit to 15, then Werewolf to 15, Spirit to 15, and then Earth and Sky to 15. Now, once you've got the radiuses expanded, you want to get Werewolf to 21 first, then Exploit, then Spirit, then Undaunted, then Earth and Sky. Now, overall, what board should I get? Now, overall, the boards of the starter board, you do just want to pick up Prime, and you want to pick up Impel, and get straight to the next board, which is going to be the natural achievement board. Not natural achievement board. A bit silly if you get the legendary at times as well, which is going to be the Ancestral Gardens board. So with the Ancestral Gardens, you do want to pick up Reclamation, and you want to pick up more Spirit on kill and Maximum Spirit as well, and you want to get Ancestral Gardens, which gives you extra damage after spending a certain amount of Spirit. You do want to pick up Spiritual Power. You do want to pick up Harmony, and then basically you want to go up into the next one, which is basically Thunderstruck, and then basically make your way up to here to Tempest, and then go to the next tree, which is going to be Constricting. No, you don't go to Constricting Tentacles yet. You go to down here, and you get up the next tree, which is going to be Lust for Carnage, and just basically build your way to Lust for Carnage, get Wild's Call like this, Lust for Carnage, Socket Undaunted, get Feral, and then back out. Next up, you want to go to here and go to Constricting Tentacles, and all you want to get is Nature's Will, and that's practically it. You do want to get a few dex points here, because you want to make sure that this ability for Spirit is met, and that is very, very important as well. Now, after you're done up here, what you want to do is you want to just slowly build down here for Lust for Carnage to attach your last board, which is going to be Heightened Malice. And with Heightened Malice, you get a few extra things as well. So with Heightened Malice, you get another extra board and extra few things as well. But I'll leave it to the comment below, the link below, so you can see the Paragon board and the guide overall. So you can be like, hey, this is how I build my build. Now, to give you guys a quick idea of how this build works in particular. So you can see here there's some passive damage reduction here as well. And basically this is from a pre-recorded part of my stream as well, of me starting up the dungeon for the first time. Now, so overall, what this build goes into is just basically all your storm skills are wolf skills, so you always be perma werewolf. So you can see here that basically as well, that I'm just moving around in the dungeon at the moment, and you can get a quick idea of how quickly this map clear is and how much damage that I do. So you can see here that I pop Grizzly Rage almost immediately, and you can see a lot of numbers are just everywhere popping up. And basically you can see how quickly I move, so every mob I kill, I basically get 20% extra movement speed, and with Grizzly Rage, with the debuff that I turn into a dire wolf, and my spirit costs a lot less, I just basically absolutely destroy anything that comes through. And you can see here, basically, that anything that comes in my way is destroyed within seconds. Now, overall, it does take me roughly 10 to 15 minutes, can even quicker to clear a dungeon, which means let's just get to the quick review stage of, the tenants and stuff like that. And also at the same time, you saw me take on a lot of mobs. This is a tier 50 dungeon, by the way. You saw me take a lot of mobs, and you can see that my HP barely moves unless I do something completely stupid. And you can see that I'm just basically clearing everything out effectively in 1 or 2 shots. And most champion mobs are absolutely destroyed as well. There's a few weaknesses to this build. Suppressor is a big affix that is weak, that is strong against it. But overall, you can see here, with tenant number 1 being the damage, is that yes, the Wolfnado does a lot of damage. You can safely do 50 or 60 tiers once you get up there with this build and have no real trouble of getting killed at all in it. And you also can take a lot of damage once you get all the damage reduction gear as well. Now, the next one is going to be the speed to clear, and you can see the speed to clear as well. Given it takes 7.5 minutes to 10 minutes for me to clear a dungeon generally, and 15 minutes being the highest, given how long, depending on the dungeon, it is a fairly quick clear compared to most other builds as well. And also, not to mention as well, you got that extra movement speed, you move a lot faster, you basically move at 200% speed for the entire dungeon, you're basically moving at mount speed most of the time as well, and you got a lot of legendaries focusing on it as well, and also Wolf gets, extra speed in general. Next up with the third one is, can it take a lot of damage? It can take a lot of damage. However, it can't take enough damage to do level 70s or 80s or higher tier dungeons. This is where you need to go into another build. There's a Wolfnado build that evolves into a further build with Evan Bulwark, or a further build, I believe with Temerity and a few others as well. And that's where it just basically leads you in the end, is that to be more tanky and stuff like that, it evolves into another build once you get more uniques and stuff like that as well. Now, number 4 is Synergy, and this build synergizes very, very well. You only get a bit of extra damage if you get Grizzly Rage up. However, you're not ready for Grizzly Rage too long. Once you have that full legendary at 5 seconds, you most of the times, given that Grizzly Rage, it has 1 second of cooldown every time that you use it, eventually you're going to get enough cooldown reduction where basically when you get out of dire wolf form, it only takes 4 or 5 seconds before it to get back up again, so you can spam Tornado non-stop again. And also, given that even if Grizzly Rage is down for those 4 seconds, you can spam Bloodhound non-stop as well to keep yourself up during that time. Of course, you won't do so much damage, but once you get Grizzly Rage back up, you'll just do tons of damage and absolutely flatten everyone with it as well. Especially if you get a lot of tornadoes up before you lose Grizzly Rage. So the synergy of this build is just absolutely insane as well. So you can see here, I'm just annihilating everything with not a care in the world. And I haven't even got the full build yet. Like, I haven't even got full best in slot yet, where you can be like, hey, he's got everything he possibly needs. You can see I'm missing a Tornado, missing a 10% Bloodhound crit, missing 6%, 6 second damage reduction for 20 seconds as well. So it's not even fully complete. But as long as you have a Tempest Roar, you can still basically use this build to your advantage. So what does this mean overall? It means overall, I'd say the Wolfnado build, probably about, in the first tenant, can it do enough damage? Yeah, definitely 10. Does enough damage, Basically, bosses just melt. As soon as you cast, about 7 or 8 tornadoes, you just watch this boss melt. And you can move around very easily. Basically, for, how fast does it clear the dungeon? I'd say give it an 8 or 9. It clears the dungeons fairly fast. Obviously, it's not the quickest, as sometimes you need multiple tornadoes to kill one person at a time. But hey, 8 or 9, high movement speed. I give it an 8 or 9 rating for it as well. Next one is the can it take enough damage? I guess I'd give it a probably 8. It can take enough damage in those mid-tier dungeons, but once you start hitting 70s and 80s, it's a lot harder to live, given the fact that you can't really soak the damage, and sometimes you gotta kite the mobs around. But this build requires you to be close and personal sometimes as well to get Storm Strike, to get your damage reduction up and stuff like that as well, which is a bit detrimental to it. The only thing that probably outrates it is defensiveness is probably most likely over Bulwark build, which is the one where you build your Bulwark to be like 1.3 mil and explode deliberately. Synergize, I'll give it probably a 10 out of 10 out of synergy. There's no long wait times other than that 5 seconds in between rages where you won't have something up and you won't be doing lots and lots of damage. But it synergizes incredibly well. Like the entire build, there's no missing aspects. There's no, things being like, hey, this is pretty useless in this one. It is all above board and kicks some serious butt. Anyway, guys, hope you guys enjoyed this build. Like I said, not going to take any credit for this build. I got this build from Maxroll, got this build from Teo. I recommend you do follow him and his guides as well. I just want to give a bit of a test run to give you guys a heads up on my review and my thoughts about this build as well. It is really, really good.